The Four Absolutes of the Oxford Group. Absolute Unselfishness. Part 1. My name is Steve Van Eiderstein, and welcome to the Narrowing Path, Walking the Spiritual Walk. I am looking forward to getting into reading about the third absolute from the Oxford Group, at least the third listed in this book, which is What is the Oxford Group, which is Absolute Unselfishness. It's an packed full section. I'm excited to read the first half with you tonight and tear apart some really important stuff regarding unselfishness. This has been one that I've related a lot to. So let's go ahead and we'll get into it. Thank you everyone who tunes in, by the way, on YouTube or Spotify, or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, or you're following the Facebook page, the Instagram page, TikTok, X, whatever it is. Thank you so much for the support. I really do appreciate it. But let's go ahead and get into the reading, because it's a little bit longer than the purity one that we did. So this is the third absolute from the book, What is the Oxford Group? And this is absolute unselfishness. Absolute unselfishness. Let each man do according as he hath purposed in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. 2 Corinthians 9:7. And whosoever shall exalt himself shall be humbled, and whosoever shall humble himself will be exalted. Matthew 23:12. Now we begin the chapter, Absolute Unselfishness. But ye, brethren, be not weary in well-doing. 2 Thessalonians 3:13. Absolute unselfishness is only possible if we have absolute love. We can only be unselfish according to the love we bear towards the object of our unselfishness. This love is not necessarily admitted as love by the world. Sacrifice of ourselves or our interests to other people's interests without thought of reward, is in itself love, although we may not consciously recognize it as such when we are performing our act of unselfishness. There is more joy in absolute unselfishness than selfish people realize, and it is not an unfruitful joy. Absolute unselfishness brings with it the knowledge that we are active for Christ, a zeal to go on and further Christ's rule on earth, and a certainty that whatever we may give of ourselves, our time, money, talents, or our love, it is returned by God in the very best way for us. Cast thy bread upon the waters, for thou shalt find it after many days, is a positive fact. The bread of unselfishness that we cast upon the great ocean of human life which whirls around us does come back to us, not only 100-fold in Christ consolation, but in the only sort of happiness that is of any use to us moderns in this world of illusions. Why are we envious of other people? It does not need a genius to tell us. We want things other people have and that we feel we could appreciate more than they do. We are dissatisfied. Life is unfair to us. Are we not all made alike? That being so, why should other people be more fortunate? We want to be brilliantly colored butterflies, not the drab moths that we think we are. As we become soured by failures and disappointments, life to us becomes one long wanting. Then sooner or later, our envy turns to hate of others and of ourselves. It is then some silly people say they wish they were dead, until they are wakened from their torpor of delusion by a new and inspiring cause for another fit of fresh, revitalizing hatred against something or somebody else. How they wallow in self-pity. No one understands them. They are misjudged mortals who have never had a real chance in life. What, they ask, is life to them anyway but hell? And so they go on. Absolute unselfishness? What rot! How can they be unselfish when How can they be unselfish? They want to know if they have to fight like wild beasts to even get what is due them, let alone have anything to be selfish about. Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. The curious thing is that the practice of Christ's unselfishness always takes away, as if by magic, all that self-pity. All those excuses we make to ourselves for our failures, all those things that we are being cheated, and definitely gives us in return the wonder of an inexplicable spiritual treasure, a description of what is impossible to put in words. It is curious because it is true, and some people and some great truths are very curious to many of us ordinary people. Some of us are spiritually proud, with that pride that is inclined to make us thank God that we are not as other men are, and despise those whom we feel are our inferiors in spirituality. It is this spiritual pride that gives us that sort of self-satisfaction that makes other people thank God they are not religious. A virtuous feeling that comes with some self-sacrifice for the benefit of a faith we are members of, or temptation to sin which we have, with much effort and self-restraint, resisted successfully, often tends to give us that Pharisee attitude. Our spiritual selves are often selfish. When we have discovered a new way of living, spiritual living, which makes us content, perhaps happier than we have ever been before, we are often apt to ignore the fact that there are many other people who, too, could, if we would show them how, find a better way of living, not by our fault-finding or superiority, but by real understanding of their difficulties and a simple, demonstrated faith in Christ. We are so inclined to forget that our prayers are not for ourselves alone, and that they could be as beneficial to others as they can be to ourselves. Even if our efforts spiritually to help others are ineffective, or if we realize that we cannot solve a social problem which is beyond our human scope, we can ask for the prayers of other people to unite them to our own. That is unselfishness. In home life, unselfishness is a sure foundation for harmony. It does away with friction and levels everything by love. Hatred and mistrust of one relation for another can surpass in intensity the hate and mistrusts unrelated people can have for one another. Family feuds caused by jealousy, pride, and suspicion have wrecked many lives. Who amongst us does not know of a family, if not our own, which is split by enmity? It is so very usual an occurrence, that in time, hating ourselves often becomes a sort of pastime. Hating our relatives, often becomes a sort of pastime, and we are very pleased with ourselves when we have scored some point in our favor in the game of hating those to whom we are related. The silly spectacle of two people closely related ignoring each other in public because they are playing the hating game is too familiar to some of us to be funny any longer. Give and take is a popular remedy for unselfishness that is supposed to be able to end these feuds, but the expression would be more practical use if the take were not included. It is more blessed to give than to receive. It is miraculous what giving with no thought of return can do to disarm the person who is opposed to us. When we give to him without a self-motive, there is no hostile retort he can honestly make, whether our giving be essentially material, a point of argument, or a point of personal pride. The practice of absolute unselfishness of Christ is an unfailing remedy for family discord. It is natural for growing children to resent parental control, which they think is bad discipline or selfish ownership, and to make up their minds to get away from home at the first opportunity. But what children brought up to value unselfishness, and with the example of Christ before them, would not understand and appreciate advice and wise control from parents who have not only instilled that unselfishness into them, but practiced it themselves. Because it is founded on love, unlimited unselfishness between married people makes marriage proof against disagreements and divorce, and the bond between them grows stronger as the years pass. This mutual unselfishness can become, by practice, an instinct. One knows what the other needs without asking and supplies it without showing what the unselfishness costs the giver. Appreciation of others' unselfishness does not lessen, but grows as character develops. It is real comradeship, and love without comradeship is not marriage in the true sense of the word. And that is where we're going to end today. That's about halfway through the chapter, and holy cow, that is a chapter filled with relatable circumstances for myself and with almost awe-inspiring wisdom in my perspective. And it shows me a lot where 12-step programs got some fundamental ideas from this unselfishness, actually. And so I was really grateful to read through it again. So this chapter starts with a couple of Bible verses, 2 Corinthians 9:7, Matthew 23:12, 2 Thessalonians 3:13 as well. And what was interesting about them, I believe, was I think it was the Corinthians. It was just talking about God loves a cheerful giver, I think is what it... Let me read it again real quick here. Sorry about that there. God loveth a cheerful giver, yes. So give from your heart, right? Not selfishly for one reason or another, whether it be for a return on investment or for appearance sake or whatever it might be. So it's a great couple of verses it opens up with. Now, excuse me. That opening statement, that opening sentence, that's a very heavy sentence. And there's like a lot of depth to that sentence. So I'm going to invest some time in just talking about it. So this is the quote that it opened up with after that third Bible verse. Absolute unselfishness is only possible if we have absolute love. We can only be unselfish according to the love we bear towards the object of our unselfishness, whether it be a person, a thing, an institution, whatever you might be practicing unselfishness towards. But that sentence, there's some real depth that I would just want to explore with you. And first, I think it's interesting that they put that right at the front, because the first absolute we did was absolute honesty. The second one was absolute purity. We are now doing absolute unselfishness. And the fourth absolute is absolute love. So it's interesting to me that they put absolute unselfishness, excuse me, I'm probably going to start slurring that word together, before we did anything regarding absolute love. Now, my suspicion is because they did that because love is really the basis for the other three. Absolute love could honestly be the only absolute needing to be practiced, and absolute love or absolute honesty, purity, and unselfishness would grow from absolute love. But to have them articulated out is really important. So I would guess that's why they're putting it at the end. But no, so the first thing, it was just interesting to me that they said the absolute unselfishness is only possible if we have absolute love, kind of setting it up for the last final absolute that we're going to be reading about here in a couple of weeks. And then it is also kind of just a acknowledgement of the fact that, like, you don't practice these one at a time. You don't practice them progressively, like, oh, I'm going to be absolutely honest first in my life and not the rest, because you can't be absolutely honest without absolute love. Absolute honesty plays into absolute purity, and those two things play into absolute unselfishness. So you kind of got to take all the absolutes and begin to institute them all at the same time. And when you can do that, pieces start falling into place better. So that was the first thing I wanted to mention, that the absolute love we haven't talked about yet as per the course of the book. So it's pretty interesting. But let's move on to the second piece that I wanted to cover here, which was the harsh truth contained within this. So you can only be unselfish as to the depth you love. So unselfishness means that you're acting without regard or expectation of a return for you in the actions or whatever it is that you've done, right? So you are only giving, right? So the only way you can genuinely do that is from a place of love, is from a place of genuine concern and desire for the well-being of your fellow man, right? That's kind of the perspective I take of absolute love. It's and when you function from that place, you can be absolutely unselfish because you're not giving it with an expectation of return. The action is not done for any reason regarding self. Because if you're doing it for any reason that's regarding you, saying you want to give somebody something or help them with that, so you can keep a scorecard. So many people keep scorecards and think they're good people. Those two things do not go together. I will tell you right now, if you're keeping a scorecard as to who you've done good things for, so you can call it out in a moment of stress and need, and you have an expectation that will be returned, that is selfish. That is not a genuine unselfish act. That's hard for some people to stomach, I know, but that is the truth. It's a harsh truth, right? Or if you're doing it just so you feel good about yourself. Some people get addicted to helping people. Some people get a rush out of being the savior for someone else. Some people feel like they're important when they can help somebody else. That is still a selfish motive if you are doing it solely for that feeling, right? If you're engaging in an action or taking certain steps because it makes you feel better about who you are as a person, and that's your primary motive for doing it, then you're doing it for selfish reasons. And that's never a good thing, ever. It is never a good thing or the right thing to be doing. Now, this can be, so if you take any action that you do to receive worth, value, love, validation, a sense of ease knowing I'm doing the right thing, that's selfish. It's self-centered. That's making what you're doing all about you, actually, and you're using that person for your own selfish gain. You're not doing the right thing to do the right thing. There is the possibility, there is the ability that you can actually just do the right thing because it is the right thing to do, regardless of what reward you might get, whatever compensation you might get, right? Doing the right thing requires no justification in reciprocity. I believe I worded that correctly. So it's a big piece of this whole puzzle is to take a look at this. Is what are you getting something from it? What are you getting? So that'll tell you a couple of things about yourself, right? Are you doing it for the right reason? Now, there is something to be said for just doing the right thing for whatever reason it is. I had to start there, right? Like I had to just start taking right actions. I had to start doing healthier things even though I was doing them so people would like me, even though I was doing them so I'd feel better about myself, even though I was doing them so I could have, so I could satisfy the legal entities above me when I started this whole recovery and spirituality journey, right? So like I had no pure motive to actually start with unselfish acts, right? Or a true sense of being unselfish. So I was taking the right actions for the wrong reasons, right? But what that did was it allowed me to take a look at myself, because it said, well, I'm only doing this. Yes, I believe it's the right thing to do, but I'm really only willing to do it because I get this sense of value from it. So what does that mean? That means I have to take a look at me. I need to take a look at why I don't feel like an individual of worth and value until I do something that others deem as appropriate and right. That's a problem. That's a self-worth issue. And we need to take a look at that, right? If you need validation in any way, if you need to feel like you're loved by somebody, that's why you act the way that you do, right? People do this in relationships all the time. It's where the roots of codependency come from. It's if you are taking actions to solely feel valued, accepted, and loved in a relationship, and you're doing it for that transaction, that's an unhealthy relationship. That's an unhealthy relationship dynamic. That's a selfish relationship. You're not genuinely doing these things for the good of the other person. You're doing them so you get something out of them. Now, for me, this was breaking news. For me, this was, I didn't realize that's not what we're supposed to do. I thought, you give me what I need to feel better about myself, I give you what you need to feel better about yourself. But that is not a relationship dynamic that stays functional, because then you can become dependent on that person to feel whole and to feel validated and to feel loved, right? When these things should not be coming from external things in the physical world. So the second point I'm really talking about is you have to do the right thing for the right reason. And you do it because it's the right thing to do, with no thought of its impact upon yourself, which is a very difficult thing for us to do because we've been trained in it by society and movies and this and that and the other thing. We can make an argument for so many things. But the reality of it is, regardless of where it originated from, regardless of when the seeds were planted, regardless of what material, commercial, societal thing is telling us it's okay, it is not okay to do it this way. It is not okay to view everything as serving a purpose for your own selfish, self-centered ends. It can become abusive. It can be, you just end up using people, and you become very selfish and self-centered, and you harm people in this way. You take advantage of people in this way. And you cause a lot of damage that you don't intend to do. That was my experience. I've harmed more people than I care to admit, because I thought that that's how it was supposed to be, that I thought people were supposed to give me these things so I felt like a decent human being. Because the reality is, I inherently felt like I wasn't. I felt worthless. I felt valueless. I felt pathetic. And I was willing to do so much just for someone to tell me I wasn't. And those people that were willing to tell me I wasn't, I desperately needed to keep them in my life for my own selfish ends. I became dependent on other people. And this is the third point I really wanted to dig into. I mentioned it a little bit already, but you have to have a proper understanding of dependency when it comes to these things, which has been one of the most difficult things for myself to sort out. It's been one of the most difficult things for me to really get clarity and understanding around. I was a horrifically codependent person with people at my job, my coworkers, my boss, my significant others, my family, my friends, with substances, with money, with a job, with prestige, with power, with absolutely everything I was horrifically codependent with. I needed it all to make me feel like I was a worthwhile human being. Because if I didn't have all that, you might actually see that I wasn't worth your time, that I was a worthless individual, because that's what I believed about myself. And I believed that from a very young age. And I was one of those people that was trying to get something from everybody I interacted with. I was selfishly trying to satisfy my own needs through these transactional relationships. I was dependent on these things. Money, property, prestige, people, places, things. All of those words that people in recovery know so well. And that is what codependency is. I needed it to exist. And it's unhealthy. It was crippling how unhealthy it was. It really destroyed me. Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I felt isolated and resentful. And I felt like the world just didn't treat me fairly. Because the world was supposed to give me everything I needed. And when people would push me away because I was too needy, or I was too angry, or I was too standoffish to them, because I was trying to manipulate them to get what I needed, I felt as though the world wasn't fair to me. Really believed that. I had no clue it was just me that was the problem, which is amazing to think about now. But so when I say this, the third point of this is people are selfishly and self-centeredly codependent in their lives. So I read this in a book by called Shame and Guilt by Ernest Kurtz, I believe is the name of it. We might read that at this podcast at some point, but it talks about how I had an inappropriate dependency because I became dependent on drugs and alcohol. I became dependent on other people. I became dependent on money for my sense of worth and validation. I became dependent on my job. I became dependent on so many things for this. And what I've had to do in my recovery, what I've had to do in my spiritual journey to heal, is I've had to figure out one by one, really. It's been a slow process for me. I've had to actually, one by one, figure out what those dependencies were. And then I had to figure out what that dependency did for me. And I had to figure out why I felt the way I did that made me feel like I needed that dependency in the first place. And as I figured this stuff out one by one, I started taking these dependencies on this physical world outside of me for my mental, spiritual, and emotional health. And I started to place them on a God of my understanding. I started to get my validation from my God. I started to get my sense of worth from my higher power. I started to get my sense of love and appreciation from my God. And when I started to do that, I was able to take these unnecessary demands that I've placed on this world and the people in it and let people be exactly who they are. I didn't have to selfishly demand that they change and give me what I needed, so I felt safe and secure and loved. I let people be exactly who they are because I placed my dependency on a God of my understanding that provided me everything I needed. And when I can do that, I am coming from a place that I can be genuinely unselfish with my actions because I do not need anything from the people around me anymore. I don't need them to fill a void in my soul anymore because it has been appropriately placed with a God of my understanding. That can never be taken away from me. That was where my truest sense of who I am has come from, and where it's always supposed to have been. But we all get lost along the way. So to be able to actually say, I want to be absolutely unselfish, means we have to be willing to change our dependencies to being on God and God alone. Because then we can function from a place of genuine love, compassion, and take unselfish action that does not require them to behave or reciprocate in a certain way that I approve of or demand. Which was very difficult for me to do. So, that was the first sentence. I can't believe how much was just written in that sentence. So we're gonna move on to the next thing. But there's a ton. There's a lot in this whole thing. So, but just remember, God gives to us, then we give to each other. We do not take, we give. Pretty amazing. So right after that sentence, though, it goes into this definition of love and unselfishness, which I think is very as good a definition as any, but it's sacrifice of ourselves or our interests to other people's interests without thought or reward is in itself love. Although we may not consciously recognize it as such, when we are performing our act of unselfishness, a lot of times we don't know that we are taking a loving action when we are being truly unselfish, because we're just doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, which is in and of itself unselfish, but that whole dynamic turns out as an act of love towards another human being. So it's a really pretty good definition. I really enjoy that, actually. And when you think about it from that perspective, it helps you get a little bit of a checkup on what you're doing. Helps you really take a look at your actions. It helps you really identify if you are doing something for the right reason. And I like this next part I went into. This next sentence that I talked about on this first page, we're still on the first page, really touched on a concern that I had about being absolutely unselfish and absolutely loving, right? Because it says there is more joy in absolute unselfishness than selfish people realize, and it's not an unfruitful joy. So I was of the mindset that if I become unselfish, I will never again have joy and happiness in my life, because the only way I have it is if I fight tooth and nail and I do the things that I know I can do to make me feel a certain sense of pleasure, right? So I really thought if I became completely unselfish or absolutely unselfish, that I would never be happy again. I believed that lie so completely that it just took being genuinely unselfish off the table, because I needed to make sure I was getting what I could to just endure this miserable life at the time. I didn't know there was another way to live. I didn't know there was another way to think. I thought everybody that didn't think like me was just ignorant. That's how arrogant I was. I was so delusional when I was at my worst. I had lost touch with reality completely, and I had built this fantasy world where it was Me having to just fight for my piece of this miserable world that I might be able to carve out some sense of fulfillment at some point. But my whole life was going to be a battle for that little piece of the world that I was trying to earn for myself. So to tell me that if I'm absolutely unselfish, my life will become better than I could have ever dreamed, I would have called you a liar. I would have laughed in your face. I might have even gotten angry. Because how dare you tempt me with hope? How dare you tempt me with hope? So, there's a lot of joy, fulfillment, contentment, peace, serenity that comes with this practice of absolute unselfishness that I'm glad I've been blessed with the opportunity to participate in. And it talks about how it comes back to us, though we have to be careful that this is not the reason that we do it, right? This goodwill and good fortune that we unselfishly give to others will eventually come back to us in some form or fashion. And I like how they said it. It said in the right way for us, because we don't always know what the right way for us means. We don't always know what that entails. So we're talking about casting bread on the water and it will come back to you 100-fold. And they don't say do it because it will come back, but have confidence that what is right will happen and trust God with the rest, right? So you take the right actions and trust that the God of your understanding will provide for you what you need when it's appropriate, right? You don't do it as an investment policy. You don't do it so you get a certain amount of money or you get a certain situation or circumstance or person in your life. You do it because it's the right thing to do. You just take with you the confidence that God will take care of what needs to be taken care of. And lo and behold, it will usually come back to you in some way. But as long as that isn't the reason you're doing it, it's okay to know that. And they had a quote there at the end of that paragraph that is how it comes back to us. And it ends with, "And in the only sort of happiness that is of any use to us moderns in this world of illusion," right? So they're saying there, it comes back to us in a way that's real, which is crucial in this time of illusion and deception and false reality. And remember, this was written 100 years ago, so they knew everything was going that way. And now it is truly that way, with social media creating false narratives, with video games becoming all encompassing, with movies becoming just something you can lose yourself in and be enveloped in, right? With the substance use problem in the West, right? Where people are just getting lost in these things. When we practice absolute unselfishness, it comes back to us in the most real way we absolutely need. And that truest experience is presence of God and joy and reality that many of us ran far from away from for a long time. I like that this rings true just to my experience so much, because I never trusted that. I thought I always had to do it for myself. I had to always make my own joy and happiness. I had to manufacture joy, which you can't do, it turns out. Joy appears in a moment. Joy appears in the ability to be present, which I never was able to do. So, but we jump into next to talk about envy and the reason why we're selfish, or some characteristics of our selfishness, maybe is a better way to say it too. So, and it's amazing what he said in this writing, and just the sense of I don't think they didn't use the word entitlement, but like that's a word that very much fits it. We begin to we feel a sense of entitlement, and that we deserve things more than other people do that have them. Right? We're all just human. Like, why do they get that and I don't? I would appreciate that car more than they would. I would appreciate that partner more than they would. I would appreciate that job, that money, that life circumstance more than they did. They do. So why do they get that and I don't? I'm entitled to the same thing. We become envious and jealous. Those are crippling emotions, right? And when we see that, right? When we see this, I want what this person has because it's going to give me that validation, that sense of worth or peace, is security and safety, or whatever it is that thing represents to you, that we envy and lust after almost. When we start to do that, we think through that selfish mindset, and that perspective. There's that quote. It's short, but it's beautiful. We are dissatisfied. Life is unfair to us. Suddenly, we get put in a position where we're fighting the world. We're going after the world, right? Like, okay, now it's time for me to take from it, right? We become so focused on taking what we need out of life. We are selfish just to our roots, because we just continue to think about ourselves and what we should be entitled to and what the world isn't fairly giving us, because we've earned it. So then we start to not care how we treat other people or what we have to do to get what we believe we need. Welcome to addiction. People and families get run over all the time because someone's going over after what they think they need and they're entitled to. I harmed a lot of people doing this and having this mindset. Harmed a lot of people this way. And the thing is, this sense of envy and entitlement, it mutates, it grows, it becomes more insidious and more damning and more dark. And it says it's like a second part almost to that first quote of we are dissatisfied, life is unfair to us, right? And then it says later on, a couple sentences later, sooner or later, our envy turns to hate of others and of ourselves. Because we start hating other people because they have what we want. And then we start hating ourselves because we don't have what they have. And we can't seem to work it out. We can't seem to figure this whole thing out. I just want the answers. Give me the rule book. Give me the instruction manual so I can play the game like they played the game and I can have what they have. Why can't I figure this thing out? The self-loathing is just deep rooted in those situations. It's just overwhelming. And then it goes, all right, I got to open this up real quick because I want to read the end of that paragraph. And it says, the last couple of lines here, how they wallow in self-pity. That was me. I wallowed in self-pity. It was just poor me. The world's not fair. I'm unlucky. The world just doesn't treat me right because I thought I was entitled to absolutely everything. No one understands them. That was me. I was too smart for anyone to understand me. All these simpletons around me. My ego and arrogance was astoundingly delusional. They are misjudged mortals who have never had a real chance in life. Like, that was just, I can't believe they wrote about me in this book and it was 55 years before I was born. Like, it's just amazing how the symptoms of selfishness take root, and it's so predictable. It is so incredibly predictable. This is exactly how I was when I was out drinking, drugging, and selfishly running around trying to make myself feel better about being alive. That is exactly how I felt. I wallowed in self-pity. I didn't feel understood. I was misjudged by everyone around me. I felt like I never really had a chance in life. What they ask is life to them anyway, but hell. That's what I felt like. I'm in this hell. I wish this would just end, right? And so they go on. Absolute unselfishness. What rot? How can they be unselfish? They want to know. If they have to fight the like wild beasts to even get what is due to them, that let alone have anything to be selfish about. I didn't think I could be unselfish because I didn't think, how can I be unselfish? I don't even get what I'm entitled to. The world doesn't even give me what I need. So how am I going to be unselfish with other people? I have to fight this world tooth and nail, like a wild beast, it says, just to feel okay. And I didn't actually feel okay. I was out of my mind on drugs and alcohol. I was so disconnected and numb, but I associated that with okay, which is amazing to me. When I look back on it, I thought that was okay. Mind-blowing stuff here. But I just completely relate to absolutely every symptom of selfishness that they're talking about right here, because that was me to my core. I couldn't be unselfish because I haven't even been given what I needed yet. How can I give back? How can I be unselfish to others? Let me take what I think I need to take first. It just blows my mind. So, it just is a skewed worldview. It puts me at the center of the world. It makes me feel like I'm supposed to be taken care of, and that the world is just supposed to give me what I need. And what I found was I'm supposed to be going to God with these things, not to the world. This material world is full of things that are easy to find yourself distracted by, and easy to find yourself falling into and getting caught up in. And I went in head first. And that self-pity just grew like a rot in my soul. I didn't know how to get rid of it. I couldn't ever get rid of it, because the one thing I wouldn't do was try to be unselfish. You know, it says in this reading, it was just saying, curious thing about is that the practice of Christ unselfishness takes away, as if by magic, all the self-pity, being of service, being unselfish, absolutely unselfish. Christ-like unselfishness cures self-pity. It also takes away all the excuses for ourselves and our failures, all those feelings that we were cheated, and definitely gives us in return wonder of an inexplicable spiritual treasure, a description of which is impossible to put into words. So not only does it cure our self-pity, but it stops me from making excuses. It stops me from feeling like I'm the victim of the entire world too. Just by being unselfish, just by willing to practice a little bit of a spiritual principle, suddenly my life changes in an immense way. Now, the next part it shifts into, I know this is going to be one of my longer podcasts, I apologize, but the next part it shifts into, I think, is just fantastic, because it talks about how we suddenly, through whatever course of action or life event that brought you to beginning to have a spiritual awakening and beginning the spiritual journey and walking this narrowing path, right? And you finally get some spirituality, and then suddenly our ego reemerges, right? And we're selfishly holding on to this spiritual way of living. We're selfishly holding on to our spiritual arrogance, our spiritual pride, right? And we use our spiritual experience now to put ourselves on this judgment soapbox and condemn those who still have not had a spiritual experience. And we sit there in judgment and condemnation. And we use it not to build people, but to tear them down. Just to validate our own egos, to make ourselves feel better, to give ourselves worth. Still, again, right? We have to be very careful with this. That we don't take this spiritual arrogance and develop what he calls this Pharisee, what they call the Pharisee attitude in here. That I am better than you. It's not what happens. When you start practicing spirituality, you begin to realize everybody is a human being here. Everybody has this spirit of God within them that we can nurture and develop. If we just supply them with the tools that they need, we can at minimum at least reach a hand out. It said in this chapter, our spiritual selves are often selfish. We want it all for ourselves. But this is such a fantastic quote because we hoard our spirituality. We hoard our spiritual knowledge. We hoard our spiritual experiences to judge and put other people down that have not had them yet. When in reality, we should be viewing them with compassion and unselfishly giving of ourselves to help them find and have a spiritual experience of their own, to get them connected to a God of their understanding. But instead, we use them for entertainment. And then we fail to share our experience, right? Then we're living selfishly, even spiritually, with all the spiritual knowledge that we've had. And eventually that will just get recycled back into your own way of life, because that can only work for so long. It's been my experience and what I've seen occur. So we have to be very aware of that. Unselfishness with spirituality is key. This is being of service to our fellow man and helping all of us rise, reaching out the hand to help someone else and sharing our experience. And then we end this chapter reading, though, with the unselfishness and its impact on the family. And it talks about something that's very familiar with many, I think, that with families that are in constant turmoil with each other, battling each other, arguing and fighting over this or that, or money or inheritance, or whose house Thanksgiving is going to be at, whose house Christmas is going to be at, who's going to be at a wedding. Ooh. What to do with someone's ashes. Like these petty little arguments infect every single family. And it talks about how to correct them. It says, it is miraculous what giving with no thought of return can do to disarm the person who is opposed to us. When we give to him without self-motive, there's no hostile retort. And he can honestly make whether our giving be essential or material a point of argument. Oh, this is the part I wanted to slow down. No hostile retort he can honestly make. Whether our giving be essentially material, like actual material objects, a point of an argument, right? So we stop trying to defend our opinion, or a point of personal pride, right? Like if someone's insulted us, we let it go. Don't take it personally. Because to take it personally would be a selfish thing to do. But to not take it personally, let it go off. Let it just go to the wayside, and we're able to continue to grow and mend a family in that way. That's much more effective, much more healthy than we even realize. So I just wanted to read those three things. So it can be material things, point of argument, or point of personal pride. And when we're actually absolutely unselfish about that, families heal. It heals all sorts of relationships. It also helps with raising children. I mentioned children, that if we're practicing absolute unselfishness and we instill that in the children that are around us and that we're raising, that children are more willing to accept instruction from someone who's absolutely unselfish, and they've seen it demonstrated, so they can actually believe that someone's doing it not for their own self-interest, but for the child receiving the instruction. I didn't even think about that until I read it in this book this time, and I was like, that's a beautiful thing to point out, right? Because if the child knows that you practice this absolute unselfishness, not necessarily because you've articulated it that way, but just the way you live and the way you act and the way you conduct yourself, then the child's much more willing to believe that what you're doing is in the child's best interests from the best of your ability. They're much more willing to receive it because they don't have their ego combating yours, and you don't have yours combating theirs. Pretty powerful stuff. And then to also think about how this can help heal marriages too. It talks about people growing together, right? And people, divorces being saved, and people being genuinely unselfish and absolutely unselfish in their marriages allows people to grow together again. And I'm going to read the last line here. Appreciation of others' unselfishness does not lessen, but grows as character develops. So people think, oh, they're going to take advantage of me, they're going to use me. But if two people are both being absolutely unselfish in a relationship, it just fosters a beautiful, beautiful set of circumstances. And then it says, it is a real comradeship, and love without comradeship is not marriage in the true sense of the word. I looked up comradeship. It means a group of people working in a direction together or for a common cause, right? So building that relationship, you become comrades, you become partners in this relationship, which is the goal of a marriage. And that can be fostered and nurtured with absolute unselfishness. So absolute unselfishness are acts of absolute love that allow people to be able to be cared for without a sense of guilt and shame, because we're demanding something from them, and they don't feel manipulated. They don't feel any obligation. And we feel, when we're being absolutely unselfish, that we are doing the right thing. We know we're doing the right thing. We're doing the right thing for the right reason, because it's the right thing to do, not because we're expecting a reward or something in return. We have faith and confidence in the God of our understanding that this practice of absolute unselfishness is the right thing. And we trust God with all the outcomes. Whatever your God is, again, this is a principle that is practiced in any spiritual walk, whether it's a deity you worship, your personal understanding of a God, your energy, source, power, universe, Mother Nature. I don't mind whatever you'd like to call it. But this principle works for all of them. What a beautiful thing that is. So that brings us to the end. We're going to be rounding out 60 minutes for this one. I apologize for that. I hope you all enjoyed it, though. And I am definitely looking forward to getting into the second half of this chapter with y'all. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the building up of that opening line of this chapter. And I hope you go back and take a listen to that again, because that is where I've found the most freedom, peace, and serenity, is the weight of that opening line of absolute unselfishness. So thank you all again. And until next time, thanks.